and welcome to the Dance NYC 2020 Digital Symposium. My name is Alejandra Duque Cifuentes, and I am the Executive Director of Dance NYC. We're so very happy to have you with us today for our third session of the day. Before I introduce our panelists and the name and purpose of this session, I want to go over some housekeeping items for you all to consider in our time together. So the first thing is I want to thank you all for your flexibility in joining us in this digital experience and for being adaptable in these challenging times. As we are at the mercy of technology, we want to remind you that there may be delays. Sometimes we may encounter sound issues or changing circumstances that may occur during our time together. We invite you to extend grace and patience to each other and to us as we manage this virtual space together. Second, I want to name that we are working with ASL interpreters and closed captioning services that will be available throughout the entire session. Our presentations will also may also include PowerPoint slides whose information we will describe orally if they are pictures. Third, feel free to post on the comment section on Facebook with any questions that you may have for any of our panelists. We will gather them during the Q&A portion of this our session, and we will present the most relevant questions that time will allow. If we don't get to your question, we will try to respond as directly as possible or provide additional resources after the fact, which you will be able to find on the Dance NYC website. Don't forget that you can also share your feedback about this session or any of the sessions that we've shared with you today through our online survey, which will be listed on the Facebook comments. And lastly, if you have any questions or anything, again, also reach out through the Facebook comments. We're here to support you and make sure that you have a wonderful experience. So with that said, I want to introduce our next session titled Emergency Response and Preparedness for Dance Organizations and Independent Artists. Today, you're going to be hearing some key tips and details and information or considerations from a variety of experts across areas that will provide support for how you as an organization or artist can respond to this moment and prepare for the future. Those folks that are with us are first, Talila Lewis, the intersectional community lawyer and consultant and founder of the Harriet Tubman Collective. Clarissa Soto Joseph, Associate Director of Pentacle. Jaime Benson, Digital Marketing Manager, CUNY Dance Initiative. Courtney Hodge, Associate Director of Inbound Marketing, Fractured Atlas. Julian Schubach, Partner, ODI Financial. Elizabeth E. Schlissel, Employment Attorney, Tannenbaum, Helpern, Syracuse, and Hirschtritt, LLP. And Merlin Jean-Louis, Business and Entertainment Attorney, Jean-Louis Law, PC. As members of the dance community and the dance workforce are navigating the impacts of their livelihoods and operations in response to COVID-19, we've assembled these team of experts to speak to the pressing concerns of our community. The session will provide insight on legal implications, financial strategy, remote work tips, advocacy for disabled artists, insurance protections, and any of the resources that you may need at this time. We will be again posting the resources on our website, and Dance NYC is also currently undergoing an impact survey that independent artists or organizations can complete to let us know how you are weathering this moment. The data that we are collecting from the survey is allowing us to advocate at the city, state, and federal level to ensure that artists and arts workers and cultural workers are a part of any of the policies and laws that are being passed as our government responds to this moment. Additionally, on our website, you can find a page of information with resources that share what is happening at the federal, state, and city level, as well as resources, funding opportunities, and ways in which you can care for yourself as you respond to this moment. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our first panelist, Talila Lewis.
I first want to start with an acknowledgement of the fact that I right now am occupying unceded Piscataway territories, which is now known as Washington, D.C. Acknowledge that. Second, I want to provide a visual description for myself for folks who are not sighted or who, for whatever reason, might not be able to see me in this moment. I'm a Black, genderqueer person, young-ish person. I'm wearing a Black hat, a Black vest, a gray shirt. I'm holding a marker of some sort, very large marker, and there's a bookcase behind me on my right. Thoughts that are kind of intermingled, and so I might be a bit scattered, but I hope that folks will bear with me. I think this moment has called on all of us to really try to center ourselves in a way that we might not have had to do for a very long time. And so just be patient with me. I want to acknowledge that I am the co-founder of the Harriet Tubman Collective as well. That's important. There were 17 of us at the outset. The Harriet Tubman Collective is a group of all Black, deaf, disabled, blind folks. We're artists, creators, thinkers, and we came about a few years back in response to failure to acknowledge and address disability within and by Black and Indigenous folks who were responding to state and corporate violence that Black bodies were experiencing. And so that's the backstory of that. And that's really important to name that there are many of us. I want to also name that the information that I'll be sharing comes from a long lineage of Indigenous, Black, queer, trans folks who have been and continue to do work to uplift and hold our communities, even though we are rarely acknowledged, rarely provided resources and invested in the ways that folks who might be causing harm are, so I'll say it that way. And so I just have a kind of a list of things that pointers that I want people to be aware of in this moment. And then I recognize that the other presenters will be talking more about specifics as related to their particular areas of expertise and work. I want to start by centering the working definition of ableism, and I'm going to share my screen with folks, and I'll read it aloud as well so the interpreter can also translate it. I also want to name that I'm coming off of the previous interactive workshop by Dustin Gibson, and I'm hoping that a lot of the folks who are on here also witnessed that workshop as well. But I'm going to share my screen really briefly. So the screen is a definition of ableism. And it says that ableism is a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of normalcy, intelligence, excellence, and productivity. It also goes on to say that these constructed ideas are deeply rooted in anti-Blackness, eugenics, colonialism, and capitalism. That this form of systemic oppression, ableism, leads to people and society determining who is valuable and worthy based on people's appearances, people's ability to satisfactorily, in air quotes, produce or reproduce, excel, and or behave. And it mentions here also that you do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. Share my screen. Really important in the current moment. I think for me, what I want folks to take away from this is that ableism forms and informs every form of systemic oppression that exists today, whether that be racism, trans antagonism, sexism, classism. Ableism is quite literally at the heart of all of those forms of oppression. And so what I've noticed and what is particularly concerning and distressing to me is the responses that have come out of the current coronavirus pandemic is many of the responses themselves are ableist, and they're re-entrenching a lot of the deeply problematic structures that we claim to be allegedly fighting against within each of our realms of justice, social justice, and that's of deep concern to me. It's also, I'm noticing even more of an uptick in militarization, of corporatization, of pushes against things that would be deemed socialist, et cetera. So those are some of my immediate noticings that I'll just put on the table for now. And here are kind of some of the points that I want folks to move forward with, and I'm going to be brief because I have, I think, 10 minutes, and I encourage questions, comments, concerns, all that jazz. So I want us to work hard to really acknowledge the inherent value of all humans. When crises like these, and even before crises like these exist, what we find is a projected valuation of human bodies and minds. Oh, the 60-year-old, don't give that one a ventilator, but give the white mother of 2 a ventilator. Let's have these balances of who is and who is not important, whose life is and is not worthy of maintenance. And that's really, really dangerous. What we should instead be looking to do is to push our government and to push our corporations into justice-based ways of existing if they are going to exist. And we should be, in fact, pushing them out of operation if they are not willing to, in fact, support people in their whole humanity. And for so long, and I have to name, I'll go back a little bit and provide some historical context. Black folks and indigenous folks, literally since time immemorial here on this stolen land, have been fighting for what now would be termed universal health care. And the reason why we currently do not have universal health care is quite literally because of ableism, racism, classism, and anti-indigenous sentiments. And there's a long history there that I won't get into. I invite you all to look at some of my other presentations to learn a bit more about that. But it's important to name the genesis of our current suffering. It's important to really unearth the histories that have been intentionally hidden from us, to identify and understand why the current situation is happening. And so I'll say that. I encourage everyone right now to dream much bigger than we are, and to organize for future things that will happen. So it's easy to get caught up in this particular moment and say, oh, right, Joe Biden is asking for a free coronavirus test and free coronavirus vaccines once they occur. And not to say, well, if you're anti-Medicare for all, but pro-coronavirus for all, you're still anti-life, right? Like there are these distinctions that are being made in this moment that I think are very dangerous. So we cannot applaud someone who says, oh yeah, in the current emergency, we're gonna say that these particularized things should be free or provided as a social benefit because everyone is inherently valuable, but not in the larger scheme of things. When the emergency actually has started long before this moment, that thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are dying as a result of being underinsured or uninsured in this country in quotes, every single year. That mass corporations are benefiting in the ways that they are at the expense of the most vulnerable people. These are political and economic, socioeconomic decisions to allow certain people to die. And I think we need to be very clear in our understanding of that and in our language around what is happening in the current moment. We need to really build upon the solidarity and knowledge from what we call crip wisdom, disabled folks, and also our indigenous and Black and low and no income and incarcerated comrades who have really been literally since time immemorial focused on interdependence and developing webs of support and comradeship that move well beyond the current moment, and so have been quite literally ready to set up mutual aid support systems that our government itself can't seem to manufacture despite all of its positionality and power and resources. We have, what, I think $760 billion budgets going into the military, but no one seems to be able to figure out how we can ensure that folks have food, shelter, clothing, housing on a daily basis. So I want us to think outside of what's happening now, coronavirus. That's important, yes. But separate and apart from that, what has been going on? How has mass incarceration been allowed to maintain and perpetuate itself without mass uprisings? How has mass institutionalization of people labeled disabled been able to advance and perpetuate itself without mass uprisings from populations? So solidarity, not charity. There's a lot of mutual aid. Resources that have been made available. I'll allow the folks to put some of the links here. I see that I'm at time already. The other three things that I'll just say for now, and is focusing on, when I say focusing on building for the future now, what I'm talking about is don't wait until emergencies to develop your groups who are going to help you be accountable when you do harm, to help with food justice in your immediate vicinity, to help with environmental and economic injustice in your vicinity. Focusing on talking about grief and death right now is actually really important. And developing your own practices around that is really, really important right now before that actually happens. And don't settle for anything, focusing on mortgage but not rent, focusing on, taking classes, removing students from dorms but not focusing on the immediate needs of our students. And then the last thing is don't be happy to return to normal. Normal was never good for most people. So I'm not sure why folks are like, we need a return to normal. We need to return to something much more radical than normal ever was. And we need to center love and interdependence in whatever it is we return to. And the last thing, absolute last thing for this moment, is to acknowledge the limitations of the law and electoral politics. So I'm gonna pass the mic to whoever the next person is. I think it's Clarissa.
So to introduce myself, my name is Clarissa Soto Josephs. I go by pronouns she, her, and I'd like to acknowledge that I'm currently on the land of the Lenape people. I am the Associate Director of Pentacle. Pentacle, we're a nonprofit management support organization, and what we're trying to do every day, whether in crisis or not, is we're always focused on helping artists really develop their infrastructure. So I guess I'm coming at it as we go into the rest of the session. We have some really great speakers coming up, and they are going to go into some of the specifics. So I'm gonna just try to provide some tips and some advice on just overall what a good infrastructure perspective could be. I also want to take this time to just describe my background. So I am a Latina woman. You'll see behind me I have a white background. I'm in the living room, and I'm wearing a red shirt. I also have dark black hair. Okay, so the first thing I want to start out with, as I said, at Pentacle, we are always focused on infrastructure, whether we're in a crisis or we're not in a crisis. And I'm seeing now more than ever, this is the great time that those that were able to develop some sort of infrastructure, they're a little bit more equipped to deal with these sort of things. Not that this was ever expected, but you're really seeing how important infrastructure is. And so even if you did not have infrastructure developed, this is a great time to do that and to start. So my first sort of piece of advice as artists have been coming to me is the first thing to do is to really look at your financials first thing, right? I do come from a fiscal background, so I tend to go to numbers first a lot of the time. But I say that because in this moment of crisis, we have many engagements, pretty much all engagements for the next 2 months canceled. We have residencies, teaching opportunities, and even aside from the arts, you have those non-artistic jobs and freelance positions that are just, we're not working. And so what I've been telling the dance companies that I work with and the dance artists is take a look. What is your general operating expenses? Take a look at cash flow. How many months can you go? How long can you go just paying your operating expenses? Now, for those of you that have that infrastructure and have bookkeeping set in place and a cash flow statement, that was probably a relatively easy task. For those of you that did not, it's okay. And I think we have sort of the immediate short-term response and we have the long-term thinking. Immediate response, look at that bank account, take a look, kind of at your list or whatever organizational methods you have, what money is coming in, what money is still coming in, what money is going out, right? And take a look at those numbers and figure out just in the immediate, what are your needs? On a more long-term scale, this is a perfect time to really make sure you have an organizational budget, that you have a cash flow statement, and that you really are keeping these documents up to date on a weekly or monthly basis, depending on the size of your organization. And so this has been a great test, and I've seen it that the artists that did have these things in place are really at least thankful that they have that set up. One other thing that I like to say in terms of the finances, so like I said, we have the short-term immediate response, and then we have the more long-term. So once we get through, okay, what is our cash flow for right now? Then we can move on to other things like really developing a proper, more formalized bookkeeping system or a true budget, profit and loss statements. All these things can come down the line now as some of us have some more time on our hands, but I definitely understand there's two paths that are going at the same time, the immediate and the long term. So I'm not going to go too much into that because I know we have a great speaker, Julian, who's going to go all into the finances. The next piece of advice I have, this is a time where we need to be communicative and transparent, not only to donors and presenters and to our board of directors, but most importantly, I think, to our own staff and to our team. So whether it's your dancers, whether it's your administrative staff or your contractors, your teaching artists, this is the time to just be very open and transparent. Now that you know how much cash you have in the bank, you see how long you can survive on that, just on operating expenses, prioritize. So now you have the information to really be open and honest with your dancers. This is how much I can pay you, and this is how much, unfortunately, I cannot pay you at this time. But hopefully you can pay them that down the line or something to that sort. But at least this will help you stay organized and help you be really transparent, because right now it's everyone's lives at stake, right? Not only from a health perspective, but also from a financial perspective. We're all trying to make sure we can pay our rent and pay the bills and get food on the table, over the next couple months. So that transparency is crucial at this time. I think another important thing is that compensation aspect of it. So I know it can be a little difficult to talk about that sometimes, but I think we're in a time that people are doing the best they can, and so I think it's a two-way relationship. From there, I say, now let's take a look at your funding opportunities. For you, perhaps if you're a small 501c3 company, there's some resources that are out there, more coming along the way in terms of grants, loan programs. I know Dance NYC has a list of resources. Pentacle also has a list of resources on our website. So take a look at that, of course, and do what you can for your organization, but also take a look at what you can do to help your dancers and your contractors, how you can assist them, especially if you had to give them the bad news that you can't pay them as much as if you had planned, but at least now guide them through, share these resources that are out there for freelancers, maybe even help them fill out some of these applications and whatnot. So really showing them that support also goes a long way during a time like this. I think going along that route, I think something important is to maintain that staff morale, because eventually, I feel hopeful that eventually we will sort of move out of crisis mode and we will move into more of a sustainability mode, right? And so it's important that you don't want to lose your wonderful team, and you want to make sure that they're still committed and still believe in you and how you handle this crisis. So things that I always say is make sure you're in contact with your employees at all times, even if you have admin staff working remotely, make sure they know exactly what their responsibilities are and how they can contact you, because now it's different methods, right? Also what hours you can contact each other. We're in this weird time of professional and personal time. It's very mixed. And so making sure that you both have a clear understanding of sort of your work time and your personal time, because both are equally important. In addition to that, we have a lot of great technology. So using Zoom and all these different video chat functions to hold those staff meetings and just sit and chat, even if you don't have professional things to talk about. Do virtual happy hours, do all these sort of things that'll really keep your team still hopeful and still thinking positively. This is also a really great time to train your staff in other areas. Maybe you have some dancers that had been interested in learning how to develop a website, and you have that expertise that you know how to use WordPress or whatever, whatever platform you're using. Maybe this is a great time that you can kind of, different staff people can train on different concepts and skills, so that then maybe you can say, oh, great, if you learn how to do this, I'm happy to pay you an hourly wage on developing my website or doing edits to my website or whatever that may be. So it's a really great time to be creative about how to use your staff in different ways that you hadn't previously thought of. And it's also educational for them and for you as well, as being, a mentor, a manager, a teacher, all of those things. And I know I don't have much time, so I'm kind of skipping through some things, but my other piece of advice, this is a wonderful, wonderful time to document and be prepared, right? So if you felt very overwhelmed and that you didn't have things set in place, this is a great time so that it won't happen in the future, or at least you can be better prepared in the future. So really track everything that's going on. Track those additional expenses that you're taking on. One, because funders are going to ask for that, and that's how you know how much money to ask for. Two, it's helpful for you to know that's how much you want in your cushion, right, in your reserve, so that if anything like this were to happen again, you have some money in that cushion. You want to track what are the tools that you needed to go remote. Maybe in the future, maybe a lot of your work is going to be remote. So maybe, so that may change. And so what does that mean for your operating expenses moving forward? That is a very strategic decision that you can make for your company. You want to also start, this is a perfect time to track the policies. A lot of times for small dance companies, the policies are all in our heads, and I get it. We're there too. So what a great time to really sit down, create those policies and procedures on an actual document. Make sure all your people that you're working with, your dancers, your admin staff, is aware of those policies, and really take the time to write those things down. So this is, and I say that this is a great time for archiving. This is a great time for doing your website. It's a great time for your financials. There's a lot there that you can work with if you have people that have time right now. Another thing I would recommend, if you have money in the bank and you just want to be able to pay for other service, pay it towards something, this is a great time to offer advances on things, or you can provide, if you teach class, but you're not offering classes right now, maybe provide people that they can buy a gift certificate. Maybe that's something you never did before. But again, thinking about that cash coming in so you can use this time in a way that makes you feel productive and really building that infrastructure for your company moving forward. Because I do, like I said, I'm positive, and so I believe that we will be moving forward and grow from this in the end. I know this was a lot of snippets. So if you guys have any questions, I think, you can shoot me email if you want directly, or I think we might be having a Q&A at the end. But feel free, I know Dance NYC can pass on my contact information. Thank you all, and I think now we'll be switching. Next person is Jaime.
So my name's Jaime Benson. Visually speaking, I am a lanky, queer, goofy-smiled guy, and streaming from the land of the Lenape people, known to some as Midtown East. First, from the bottom of my heart and my living room, thank you to Dance NYC for acting so quickly in this crisis. Everyone offering their expertise and everyone listening. It's rough out there, it's rough in here, and I thank you all for being humans together with me right now. I also want you to know that I am wearing my fanciest sweatpants for you. Okay, so I'm going to cram as much actionable information as I can. Long story short, I'm timing myself. My expertise is in online marketing. I have sort of wild art origins, and I learned to get a lot out of a little, and I learned to get a lot of attention in the process. And so now people hire me to do the same thing. I bring on a sort of oddball creativity into promotional plans. I believe self-promotion is self-expression. Identity is a performance, a creative act, if you will. And I think during this time, with just a touch of internet savvy, we can use that collective creativity to support each other and ourselves in the process. Okay, I'm going to try to go over some things to immediately consider to help shore up your fiscal viability. So important that we're talking about infrastructure, and I'm glad I'm actually offering another slice of this. A lot of clients that I'm working with right now are just like, what can I do right now? And so here are some things to consider. The basic tenets I teach for holistic promotion aren't even totally that different, but some adjustments seem necessary to wrap our arms around this new reality. So I think we need to do more than simply adapt to online systems to remain fiscally, and let's be honest, emotionally stable. Organic traffic, which is the website visits you get without advertising, it's already not doing well. And it appears to be dropping still dramatically across industries. This is, of course, unless you're in food, healthcare, finance, or news media. Those are the only things really seeing a big spike so far. According to the Hosting Tribunal, prepare yourself, there are over 1.7 billion websites and 2 million blog posts per day. This is before the crisis. So it's even harder now to be heard over the deafening roar of the internet. And that's not just noise that other businesses are making to try to meet their bottom lines now. It's the posting of any and everything people do to connect with each other and cope with an unprecedented sinkhole that we're currently in. So I have some guidance. Can I get it done in 8 minutes? We're going to find out. So definitely be careful not to be too opportunistic, but acknowledge the diseased elephant in the room. So this is especially true with messaging. I see a lot of people trying to push the outbreak as like a reason to use their goods or services, or even hastily creating entirely new programs hoping to capitalize on this change. I understand, of course, we're scared and reaching for any opportunities we can think of, but I encourage people to stick with something relevant to what you do and adapt the programs you currently have for the internet. Some things to think about in terms of how to reach out to people now that I found working even in the last couple of weeks. So things are shaken up. So I say be shook, publicly shook. And now this means any rules you could think of that have to do with email marketing, like the right time to email or post on social, it's gone, y'all. Get rid of it. And I would even acknowledge that in, like, say you're sending an email, try sending an email at 2 a.m. with a subject that says, I couldn't sleep either, I'm panic eating, so I stopped that and I'm doing this instead, and this is what I can offer you right now. I mean, we want to really empathize with people. Sometimes I find when people promote themselves, they shut down their humanity a little and fall into these traps of jargon or like loose rhetoric, advance your career and like, oh, don't do that. In fact, I find too many people right now focusing on productivity. We're all home alone now. We can be really at our most productive that we've ever been in our lives. Yeah, you know what that might not be taking into account? The immense waves of depression and anxiety and panic that we're all suffering from. Being hard on ourselves about being productive is not maybe necessarily productive. It's counterintuitive, but perhaps it's true. And so personally, with the work that I'm doing with the clients I have, I'm trying to even embrace this idea of like, you know what? It's scary right now, but let's maybe even approach this in a low productivity sort of time frame. Like lay out the services you have in a more expansive, stretched out way, really accounting for people's mental and emotional state and your own. Stressing yourself out doing all this isn't helpful either. So be generous as possible right now. We are all dramatically limited, not just in the ability to produce in-person happenings, but we're financially, mentally, and emotionally in a vice grip. So give a freeway into any services you provide and reduce pricing for the time being. I know this seems counterintuitive again, but we need to think long-term, as even some of my fellow panelists have already talked about. The more that we give right now, the more that we can strengthen and develop new mutually beneficial relationships. And we can use these sometimes problematic systems like social to build community, and community is power. I'm gonna check the chat, make sure I didn't miss something really lame. It seems like I'm okay. Okay, so zero in on the who, what, where, and how you can provide services online. I'll break this down as fast as I can. Okay, so the who, you want to target people with even a small advertising budget. I'm going to explain how to do this even on a tight budget. So it's actually more humane to solicit people that have shown interest in you or who are likely to show interest. I'll explain that too. So now some of you may know. I'm sorry if I'm being a little too obvious. I want to try to make sure I'm bringing everyone along with me. So there are a lot of interesting tracking codes. Tracking sounds a little ominous. It's less so than you think. Facebook has what's called a pixel. Twitter also has this iteration of a thing where you go into the back end of your business manager account and it's already exists for you. You can create this little tracking code. I explain it like a little garden gnome with a little guest book in front of your home, your website, your literal home, just like marking who's visited in the guest book. That's about it. Now, you can target people with advertising after the fact. Getting people to visit your website is no small feat. We are brutal about who we allow to like have us click through on. Okay, so that's something really important to think about. If they've shown interest, so you can target them in a humane, holistic way after the fact with something like Facebook advertising. Now, you can also create audiences based on website visits, people who visited your website, even your email list. You can upload that Excel document directly into something like a MailChimp or Constant Contact, or sorry, no, you can export it, load that directly into your Facebook account and target people based on their email address, where they are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the works. Now, you can also, this is a little more advanced, you can create what's called lookalike audiences. And Facebook does this for you, even Twitter. So to the point where you create an audience based on a thing that already exists, your website visits, your email, and it'll do all the same demographic information. So it'll target people with a similar background, interest, behavior, age, education, the works. Also, I encourage you to be more specific on your audiences that you target with advertising. Again, some of this sounds obvious and people don't do it. I work with a wide range of arts and cultural organizations and individuals. So you want to get really specific when you're targeting in the advertising platform, the style of the art, the age, the education, etc. And don't forget to speak specifically to that targeted audience with your messaging. So what I actually normally find people do is they put really vague messaging, even with really targeted audiences. I'll give an example, like make a different ad for each demographic you're going to reach out to and speak to specifically to their own needs. So like say you want to target maybe people of a certain age, a certain educational background, arts background maybe, and they're retired. You can target for that. And then say in the message of the ad, even a $5 ad, y'all, you can say, I know you're retired, you're looking for adventure or to escape this. This is what I have for you. So be as specific as you can. Okay, we talked about the who, we're going to talk about the what. Now, when you're offering services, you're adapting them for an online audience. You don't want to regurgitate the same promotional stuff that you were circling even a couple weeks ago. You want to talk specifically the unique benefits you offer now online. What's the benefit of being online in whatever capacity you're working in? So for example, like one of my clients does video singing lessons now, or they did live lessons and we're adapting very quickly to video. So when you video chat with your session, you can record the session for later use. So people get more out of their money for buying that one session, for instance, and can practice after the fact. Also, when you have a chat that you're looking directly into, the singers can see their own tongue placement, and that affects their ability to be effective in their lessons. So speak to the unique benefits you offer with this new online adaptation of whatever it is you do. If you're low on finances, which I know most of us are, to where even a small ad sounds scary, you can test some of this messaging out organically on social media and then try using what seems to work best in a small ad, like even $5, $10, $50. And we're all in an adjustment period, so have patience with yourself in this testing process. Okay, really fast. Oh, time. We're going to talk about the where and the how. This sounds obvious, but people don't say it. Tell them what services you're offering with, whether that's Zoom, FaceTime, whatever it is, and how to set it up if they don't know how to set it up, and then how they can pay. PayPal, Venmo, even if you don't, or the technical savvy is not, the force is not with you here, you can even say, just email me here to get this situation set up. Okay, now my sessions are normally 2 to 3 hours, so I could continue teaching this stuff for a very long time, but I'm afraid my time is up. In closing, there are no silver bullets in negotiating this beast of a situation, and we are only in the first act of this story. If it's something people watching right now are interested in, I can, through my email list, try offering case studies with other creative businesses I'm working with. I'm also posting videos with actionable online marketing advice through all my social accounts right now. You can contact me through jamiebenson.com with questions, concerns, or even requests for some tender loving care. I am happy to help you however I can. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to who we have next. Thank you so much, everyone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Hodge. I am the Associate Director of Inbound Marketing for Fractured Atlas. I want to acknowledge that I am currently on unceded Lenape land. I am, to give a brief description of myself physically, I am a Black woman rocking a frohawk and a headset currently to make sure that you can hear me. I have a pink shirt, a black sweater, and I'm in my bedroom/office, which has a bright blue wall and a lot of artwork behind me. I like color. I describe myself as a maximalist, and I think that shows up in a variety of ways. And so what I want to talk about connected to this emergency preparedness, or this idea of preparing for your org or your business or your project or just your work, is really about what it means to work, reassessing and understanding work. So at Fractured Atlas, we are a national art service organization, and there are two initiatives that help inform what I'm talking about. The first is our anti-racism, anti-oppression commitment. We want to actively be an anti-racist, anti-oppressive organization. We are making decisions through that lens and value that in as much of the work as we can, because it is not one person's job to make that happen. It is our organization's job to facilitate anti-racist principles in our work. And that has connected to and is tangential to another of our initiatives, which is work shouldn't suck. The idea of work as some place that we spend a lot of our time and energy, the kind of dominant idea is that it should be terrible. It's work. And we fundamentally reject that as a notion. People aren't productive, in quotes, because they are kind of punished at work. People can be productive because they care about the work that they do, because they are properly resourced in doing it, because they are supported and wholly expressed and they're in their workplace. Work shouldn't suck. Sometimes it will. Sometimes there's a pandemic and the entire nature of your work changes. And so work isn't great, but that shouldn't be a baseline. That shouldn't be what we are required to do. And so with that, I have a few things to think about. And this is from a lens of organizations or institutions. However, I would like people who do not currently work with organizations or institutions to think about it when assessing institutions or organizations you want to give your time to, and places that you spend your time. This is the organization's responsibility to take care of you. And if you are working with someone, these are things you can ask them to be aware of, and these are things that you can that can inform your approach to them. First thing is to reassess what work as a word means. We tend to assign work to be go into the office, sit at a desk, let people see you, provide what used to be FaceTime before FaceTime was an actual thing. And that created a lot of habits that we associate with work that are in fact not work. They are just spending time, expending energy. They may or may not be work. And there are also things that are work that don't look like work. Like I work in inbound marketing. I do a lot of writing, a lot of content writing. And so sometimes I am thinking in a way that is work related, that is work specific, but oftentimes in offices, we are in habits of like, I can't just think, I can't just value my own expertise and knowledge and in compiling something. I have to show work. I have to be typing, even though what I'm really doing is like trying to solve a problem. Additionally, professionalism in that way, or how we define professionalisms, so many air quotes, is often just white supremacy in a suit. Many women of color I know, and it's been my personal experience, that behaviors that are productive for me read to other people as not professional. I've been accused of being too loud simply by having conversations at work. I've been policed in a variety of ways under the guise of professionalism, but frequently that is just a manifestation of our other biases and oppressive tendencies. So really reassessing, what does work mean? allows you to be more free as your work transitions from it was in this space and now we're at home, or it was in community and now it's virtual. Like, what does the work look like? With that, in reassessing work, don't try to transfer toxic behaviors that are real life behaviors to online tools. I don't know if you all are aware, but the company Away, who makes the fancy travel suitcases, there's an article released just talking about the toxic behaviors, 1,700 word Slack messages, like this idea of trying to control and police people, but through a virtual space. So remembering that, like, you don't want to take your toxic control things that you may have, and that a lot of people have when it comes to work. The idea that I have to be seeing somebody work to believe work is happening, or if they aren't like doing it the exact way that I would do it, then they're somehow doing it incorrectly. We find ways in transferring from in real life institution to online, we find new ways to make those happen. So be aware of how you're using digital tools, what are the attitudes you're taking with you, and call it out if you're seeing it. If you see people are like, hey, you said like I don't have to respond to messages after hours, but if I don't respond to a message after hours, that's a problem. What is the deal? To what people were saying earlier, like, what is your policy? What is the concept? How can you make this implicit idea of what work is explicit and get rid of any of the things that are toxic? Next is, don't make assumptions about what people can do. So oftentimes, particularly in this transition, I've seen language or people talking about, it'll be a benefit to work from home. And yes, I find it to be a benefit to work from home, but there are some people whose homes are unsafe or unresourced. There are people who are unhomed. There are a variety of things that mean that a thing that could be good in some situations is not good for everyone. And so making assumptions about what other people's resources are and how other people can resource ultimately your institution is a fool's errand. It's a fool's game. And the solution to that is actually just to be transparent about what you need done and about what you have to offer. And this works not just for institutions, that's for anybody, I think, in leadership. As opposed to saying, you do this, or you have the resources to do this, or it'll be fine, you can do this. Say something along the lines of, these are the things that I need done. These are the resources I have to support it. This is how I can help do it. Can you help me? Consent works in a workplace as it does anywhere else. And so as opposed to saying, do this thing or be in this space, or trying to assert control in a moment that feels very much out of control over people, lean into the transparency and the vulnerability and just say, this is what I need. You'll be surprised that people can support you and can help you. And you will also be surprised to learn what you can do to support somebody else. The second kind of caveat to that around making assumptions about what people can do, also don't try to force people to disclose things they are not ready to disclose. I know there are HR, there are legal things, there are a lot of reasons to let it go, but it's important to recognize that, like, by asking what you need and giving people the option to tell you the information they need, you're not backing somebody into a corner where they have to disclose something to you that they are not ready to. In this particular moment, the work contract has changed, and I work for an organization that went fully virtual over a year and a half, and so we actually stopped having a physical office in December. And so, the transition to online, as a lot of organizations are making, was not difficult for us because at that point we transitioned. But you really have to think about what it means to work from home, what can work for people and what can't, and how people may be made more vulnerable by this decision, and frankly by any decision you're making. The last thing is, if you aren't intentional about it, you will not do it. It will be done to you. All work places, online, in person, even if it's just you in a one-man band doing the thing, has a work culture. You have things that you value, you have things that you accept, and you have things that you don't. And if you're not intentional about choosing what those values are and working through them, then what you value will show up. So if you're not taking care of yourself and you burn out, showing that you do not value yourself shows up in that way. If you are not paying your artists, or for whatever reason, it shows that that's not where you put your values. I understand not everybody has the resources. And if you, as I believe Clarissa said earlier, if you can make deals about like, hey, I don't have it, but I value you and I want to support you, and again, give people the opportunity to consent to that relationship with you, that's different than we're not going to offer it. We don't have it. We're not going to offer it. We're not going to communicate with you, and we're going to expect your labor anyway. And that ends up becoming something you value. And if you don't see that, people will make assumptions about what your values are. Yeah, I'm always happy to talk more about this. You can reach me at CourtneyHodge.com. I'm also very easy to find on the internet, but I strongly suggest you look at the Fractured Atlas blog. We do a lot of things around why work shouldn't suck, about our anti-racism work, and how we can further support individual artists and organizations. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Julian. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thanks, Courtney. So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for your time. I'm a partner at ODI Financial, and I'm an advisor to artists, entertainers, and digital influencers. My team and I provide financial education, planning, and wealth management. I'm in my office on Long Island, which is in the Rockaway territory, and I'm a white man in a gray jacket and white shirt. Behind me, just some artwork. I have Springsteen and Bowie, guitar. So I just wanted to take some time and talk about this challenging time for artists and really focus on thoughts about money and personal planning. So I just want to start with health insurance. So health insurance, of course, is a big concern for a lot of people. So we're New York State experts. So what I can tell you is for New York State, they've actually extended their open enrollment period for the exchange. So if you're looking to get health insurance, if you don't have health insurance, you're still able to log online to New York State of Health and do that. If you're in a different state, they might have different open enrollment rules, but most states have extended their open enrollment deadlines. So you can visit healthcare.gov and they'll be able to direct you to your state's exchange to be able to help you get health insurance. Also, let's just talk a little bit about what the government has done to help us. And the first thing is really what you've seen in the news over the last few days is the discussion to begin sending checks to Americans. And what they'd like to do is send about $1,200 per adult for anybody who's making under $75,000 in adjusted gross income. And that would phase out for anybody over $75,000 in adjusted gross income. I think something that's really important to remember is, in times of panic and when people are scared, a lot of times there are scammers out there. So I think it's really important that people are aware and share with their parents and their grandparents and family and friends that you'll never get a call from the IRS or from the government saying, hey, in order to send you your money or send you your check, we need personal information. We need your social security number, your bank account number. Unfortunately, these things do happen. And the scammers do make money. So just be smart and share this information, that there's really no need to share any information for anybody who comes to you unsolicited asking for it. Additionally, there's been an extension to the tax filing deadline. Generally, it's in April, but it's been extended now to July 15th. So speak to your accountant and see what you're able to do, steps you're able to take to save some money now, maybe defer some taxes, so that when July comes around, you're able to take care of your taxes then. Also, a lot of artists who earn 1099 income for performances have to pay quarterly taxes. So if you're somebody who's paying quarterly taxes, you may be able to defer your first quarterly payment in 2020. So again, reach out to your accountant if you're working with a CPA or a business manager, and they'd be able to give you some good feedback and advice for how to handle your taxes over the next few months. We're also trying to figure out different ways that the government is adding stimulus to our economy. And there have been different things that they've done to calm the markets in terms of bailouts that they're talking about, and buying up bonds, and really just trying to calm the waters a bit. And one of the things that they've done is discussing payroll cuts, payroll tax savings, tax savings. And that would be about 6.2% for employees and employers. So if you look at your paycheck, you see a certain amount of money that comes out, and that's for payroll taxes. And the government's working on alleviating those for the time being. So that helps both the employer and employees. Something that we always talk to our clients about is budgeting and putting together a budget. And everybody always moans and groans about it because nobody really wants to do it. But now's a great time to do it. We're all at home, we're together. It'll give you time to go back through your credit card statements and your spend over the last few months and take a look and see where your money is going, what you're using for discretionary spend that maybe you don't really need to. If you have subscriptions that you signed up for a year or two ago and you're not really using, cut them out. You can always add them back later once performances pick back up and people are coming back to the theater. But for the time being, if you're trying to save some money, it is a good time to start working on your budget. And you can find really good budget spreadsheets on Google or even on something like mint.com. A lot of people have been asking questions like, okay, what do I do if I'm a little strapped on cash and I need money to pay for, X, Y, and Z? And, everybody has a different personal financial situation and they have different savings and ways that they've done things for themselves. But something that I think we can speak about, because folks here are part of organizations, maybe run dance organizations or employees of dance organizations, is the ability to take a loan, if you have to, from your retirement account at work. So there are 403Bs and 401Ks that some of you may be participating in. And a lot of these plans actually allow for participants to take a loan of up to 50%. Now, every 403B and every retirement plan is a little different. They have different rules and regulations that were put in place. So what's important is to find out what you're allowed to do. So if you're an executive director or you're an HR director at an organization that has a retirement plan, reach out to your record keeper or to your financial advisor and ask what those loan provisions are. And then you're able to actually send that out to your employees so they understand the options that they have available to borrow money from their retirement account if they want to. Now, the way that that works is that you're borrowing from yourself and you pay yourself back into your retirement account. There is some interest on doing that, but this at least allows you to borrow from yourself instead of a really high rate at a bank. If you don't pay yourself back, if you take that money from your retirement account and you don't refund it back into your account, it will be counted as ordinary income, which you would have to pay taxes on the next year. If you have an IRA, so let's say you're not with an organization, you don't have a corporate retirement account, you just have an individual retirement account. Unfortunately, you can't borrow from an IRA, but what you can do is you're able to actually take some money out as long as you put that money back in within 60 days. If you don't though, there would be both a penalty and taxes for taking that retirement money. So something I'd really like to see the government do is kind of loosen up on that and say, hey, anybody who has a halfway retirement account, what we're going to do is actually allow you to take money out of that account and not have to pay it back as soon as the 60 days and not have to worry about that penalty that comes along with it. Estate planning is something else that is important to think about during this time. It's another thing that we talk to a lot of clients about, and they say, I don't really want to deal with it, but we're home and maybe we have some time to take care of it right now. And when I talk about estate planning, I really mean three main things. So the first would be your healthcare proxy. Your healthcare proxy basically says, God forbid you are, incapacitated, you're on life support. What are your medical directives? What do you want to have happen? And that's really important, and that's free. You can get that off of Google, a healthcare proxy. The other two would be a power of attorney document and a will. So the power of attorney would basically say who has the legal signing authority on your behalf if something happens to you. And the will is basically a stipulation of what happens to your assets upon your death. If you have children, who takes care of your children and who manages the money for the children. You can get these documents on a website like Rocket Lawyer or LegalZoom.com rather than going to an attorney's office and spending a lot of money. It'll only cost you $200 or $300. I know, it's not cheap, but these are important documents to have. And if you haven't done them yet, it's something really good to consider. I would say, we do have teams here that would be able to help you if you have any questions about health insurance or about your retirement account or your 403B at work. We'd be happy to answer any questions and you can reach out. Or if you have any personal questions about your finances, we'd be happy to help you as well. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to the next speaker. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Have a great day.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Schlissel. I'm an employment attorney at Tannenbaum, Helpern, Syracuse, and Hirschtritt. Now, as an employment attorney, I have been answering questions from clients every day about the coronavirus. There are recent federal and state legislation that affects employees and businesses. Now, before I get into the legal issues associated with the coronavirus, I wanted to take a moment to thank all the members of the dance community out there today who are listening in. While I am not a dancer by trade, I was fortunate enough to take years of dance lessons growing up, and I will share a quick anecdotal story with everyone. Before I even knew my right from my left, a dance teacher helped me distinguish between my 2 feet by placing a sticker on my right foot. And to this day, when I do something with my right hand or my right foot, I always think in my head, okay, it's sticker foot, sticker foot first. Now on to the more serious issues that everyone is dealing with right now. So as an employment attorney, one of the questions I get from employers is, should they issue some type of written notice or policy about the current business disruption? And my answer to that is absolutely. You want to reach out to your employees and let them know that you are there for them. You want to let them know also that any policy issued by the employer is subject to change. Things change every day and sometimes every hour regarding coronavirus updates. But an employer should designate a certain person who should be reaching out to their employees and let them know about changes in policies. This will also help the employees know who they should communicate with regarding any questions. In addition, another question I've been getting frequently is, what are an employer's obligations to pay employees who are currently not working? Now, first, an employer needs to consider whether or not that employee has any paid time off, or referred to as PTO. For example, an employees working in New York City and in Westchester County accrue up to 40 hours or 5 days of paid sick leave per calendar year, which can be used for multiple things, including their own illness, caring for a sick family member, the closure of the employee's workplace due to public health emergencies, such as declared by the mayor or commissioner of New York City Health Department, as well as to care for a child whose school or child care provider is closed due to a public health emergency. That would probably be the case right now with the recent closures of schools throughout New York City, New York State, and across the nation. Second, an employer needs to consider whether or not the employees have any other paid time off, such as vacation or leaves of absences. In addition, an employer needs to determine whether or not the employees are exempt or non-exempt employees. An exempt employee is an employee that is not entitled to overtime. A non-exempt employee are the typical hourly employees who are entitled to overtime. And last but not least, it's whether the workers are independent contractors. Those are your 1099 workers, which I understand a lot of the dance community may be. Now, once the employer and the employee has had a conversation about what leaves or leaves they may not be entitled to, it may be a situation where the employer has to terminate the employee because right now so many things are closed. In that situation, if the employee is a W-2 employee worker, they should look into filing for unemployment benefits. 1099 workers may not be entitled to as many benefits as a W-2 employee. But the government is working hard to try to relieve some of the stress and financial strains that this current crisis is causing. So just this past week, the federal government and the state legislature passed new laws. I'm going to now summarize some of the new laws that were recently enacted. On the federal end, the federal legislation that was passed is called the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Act Expansion. as well, and it's known as the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. In addition, New York State also enacted new legislation. So regarding the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, it includes the following provisions. It allows for free coronavirus testing for all, including the uninsured. It provides tax credits for paid sick and paid family and medical leave. It also provides paid emergency leave with 2 weeks of paid sick leave to qualifying individuals. And for qualifying individuals, up to 3 months of paid family and medical leave. It also expands unemployment insurance to provide greater protections for furloughed workers. It also strengthens nutrition security initiatives, including supporting national action and planning. This is known as SNAP, S-N-A-P, student meals, seniors nutrition, and food banks. It increased the federal investment to support state and local governments and health systems so that they have resources necessary to combat this crisis. In addition, the act sets forth emergency sick leave. So there are certain employer obligations that come under this new law. Covered employers are required to provide all their employees with a new amount of paid sick leave for the following purposes, and this is through December 31st, 2020. For individuals to self-isolate because the employee is diagnosed with coronavirus, to obtain medical diagnosis or care for such employee is care if the employee is experiencing symptoms of the coronavirus, to comply with a recommendation or order by a public health official with jurisdiction or a healthcare provider on the basis that the physical presence of the employee on the job would jeopardize the health of others because of A, exposure to of the employee to the virus, or B, if the employee is showing symptoms of the coronavirus. It can also be used to care for or assist a family member of the employee who is A, self-quarantined and isolated because of a family member has been diagnosed with the coronavirus or is experiencing symptoms of coronavirus and needs to obtain a diagnosis or care, or B, if the employee is subject to an order or recommendation from a public health official or healthcare provider to stay out of the community because of the family member has been exposed to or is exhibiting symptoms of the coronavirus. In addition, it can be used to care for children of the employee if his or her school or practice of care has been closed, or the child care provider is unavailable due to the coronavirus. Now, the amount of sick leave full-time employees will be entitled to is up to 80 hours of emergency paid sick leave. Part-time employees are entitled to an amount of emergency paid sick leave up to the average number of hours they work over a 2-week period. Employees are also able to take advantage of this leave regardless of the length of their service with their current employer. So the level of compensation will vary. Covered employers are required to pay every employee who takes emergency paid sick leave at a rate of compensation no less than the employee's regular rate of pay. And this is defined under the terms of the Fair Labor and Standards Act for leave taken at for any of the first 3 reasons identified above. For every employee who takes emergency paid sick leave for some of the other reasons, the covered employers are required to pay the employee at a rate of compensation of no less than 2/3 of his or her regular rate of pay. So depending on the reasons why the employee is taking the leave, that will change the amount an employer will have to pay for the sick leave. So unlike many other paid and unpaid sick leaves enacted by various state and local governments, covered employers under the new law must provide emergency paid sick leave in addition to any other paid time off the employers may already provide their employees. So under the new federal act, employers may not change their current paid sick leave policies, such as the employer cannot reduce the amount of leave ordinary available under their own policies in order to avoid the impact of this law. In addition, employers may not require employees to take or exhaust any of their employer-provided leave time before taking this emergency paid sick leave time under the new federal act. Employers also may not require employees to take emergency paid sick leave to find any replacement employees to take the absent employee's place at the work during this absence. Now, the Emergency Family Medical Leave Expansion Act provides that eligible employees will be able to take up to 12 weeks of public health emergency leave in the following circumstances. One, to comply with an order of public health official who has appropriate jurisdiction or a healthcare provider on the basis that the physical presence on the job would jeopardize the health of others because the employee has been exposed to the coronavirus or exhibited symptoms, and B, the employee is unable to perform the functions of the position to this employee and then comply with the recommendation of the order. So there's two real sections of the federal act. It's really an expansion of what people know as FMLA leave, Family Medical Leave Act, as well as this emergency sick leave. The emergency sick leave really expands what an employee can take. It allows for a lot more leeway under how an employee can take it. Now, I want to let everyone know that this is just the first wave of legislation. It usually takes a very long time for bills of this nature to be drafted, to be voted upon, and then enacted. So while some employees and some workers, such as independent contractors, may not qualify for some of these federal leaves, the government is working very hard to draft and implement new laws to provide relief to needed Americans. In one of the handouts that I think the participants are going to be provided with, there is a summary of this new federal and state law. So in addition, I wanted to let you know that for employers who have had to lay off employees during this very difficult time, there are certain obligations, such as the WARN Act obligations, which means that if you have a massive reduction in your workforce, you have certain notice obligations. So I encourage employers to look at those statutes. There's a federal one and a state one. In addition, you need to provide under New York law, you need to provide your employees with written notice of the termination. And the key part of this is, in order for an employee to file for unemployment, they will need the employer's EIN number. When they go to file unemployment, that's one of the first things the unemployment office will ask. So make sure employers, when you have to lay off workers, that you are providing your employees with this information. I have to wrap up, but again, my name is Elizabeth Schlissel. I'm an employment attorney at Tannenbaum Helpern. I forgot to identify myself and describe myself in the beginning. So for those who are visually impaired, I am a white woman in her 30s with blonde hair, and I am coming to you from a basement on Long Island since my entire office is currently working remotely. I encourage everyone out there to stay safe and healthy and follow the new legislation as it comes out, because we are sure to see additional relief packages being passed. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Merlin Jean-Louis. To describe myself, I am a Black woman, dark skin. I have shoulder length dreadlocks, red glasses, red lipstick, black blouse. I am in my living room. I have my couch behind me and a white background. So who am I? I am a business and entertainment attorney. I help, I'd say, non-traditional entertainers, including podcasters, bloggers, influencers, and dancers. I myself am a former dancer. I trained for about 10 years, and I danced semi-professionally for about 3 years. So you are my people, and that is it. Oh, my apologies. I'm in the land of the Lenape people. Just want to acknowledge that. Before I get into my presentation, I wanted to talk about a resource that I came upon recently. This is for people who are actually employers. New York City has thankfully put out what's called the NYC Employee Retention Grant Program. If you meet the criteria, you have 1 to 4 employees and meet the other criteria, you're able to be given a grant to cover your payroll for 2 months. Thankfully, Alejandra is going to send that out as a resource. So it's called the NYC Employee Retention Grant Program to help you cover payroll. These are some trying times. You've got some great information from some excellent speakers. I come from the perspective of business and entertainment. You're a dancer, you're an entertainer, and so I'm going to start my presentation right now. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so this is called Mind Your Business. Legal and business issues facing dancers. Again, my name is Merlin Jean-Louis. Hold on one second. So, important, if you are dancing, then you're operating a business. Whether you actually have a dance studio or you're a contractor or you have a dance organization, you have a business. And so you want to take steps to protect your dance business, because particularly dancers, you work so hard and sacrifice so much for your craft and for your job that you want to make sure you take steps to protect that. And so I'm going to give you a little rubric, little steps you can take to do that. So you want to protect your ABCs. I'm going to first list them all and then go talk about them specifically in order. Step 1, you want to protect your assets. Step 2, you want to protect your brand. And step 3, you want to protect your content. So step 1, protect your assets. So us lawyers, we have tools that we use in the law to do these things. And so the tools that we use to protect your assets are entities and contract law. So there are different types of entities. There are sole proprietorships, there are corporations, and there are LLCs. Each type of entity has its advantages, disadvantages when it comes to protecting your assets, right? You want to protect your personal assets and your business assets. And so you have to go into an analysis as to determine which one is the best for you at a certain time. Right now, many of you are sole proprietors. That doesn't mean you can't get insurance to protect yourself in case anything happens. If you have an entity, if you have a corporation or LLC, you're probably best more protected in case something was to happen, in case you ever to be sued, in case you want to actually take tax benefits. There are benefits to having these entities to help save you money. And contracts. There are a slew of contracts that you may want to have. Anytime, my rule of thumb is this: anytime there's someone on the other side of you, you want to have paper. You want to make sure you document what exactly is your relationship. And so you want to have maybe, if you're employing someone, you want to have an independent contractor agreement. If someone is giving you a song to use for your class, maybe you want to make sure they give you that permission, a license to use that particular content. Many of you are probably going to be changing the way you teach, right? I actually yesterday, 2 days ago, took a dance class online. I paid for it because what's happening right now with the virus has changed the way we have to make a living. Step 2, protect your brand. How do you do that? We use trademark law. So a trademark is anything. It's a word, a logo, a sound, even a color, anything that's used to distinguish one's goods and services from that of another. I think a really good example of a trademark that everyone probably knows or has heard of is the Nike swoosh logo, the check mark on the Nike shoe. It's very recognizable. It's very profitable for Nike, because once someone sees that particular logo or hears the term Nike, they know that they're getting a good sports product, whether it be sneakers, book bags, etc. For dancers, you have trademarks too. It could be the name of your dance company. If you go by a stage name, that's a trademark as well. So you just want to make sure you are, if you have like a name of a particular class that you teach, maybe now maybe a good time to think about how to best protect your brand, and trademark law can help you do that. Step 3, protect your content, your dancers. You create lots of material, lots of choreography, lots of pieces. The tool that we would use to protect that is copyright law and contracts again. Copyright is super complex, but if I was to describe it in a couple of words, it's what the tool is, the law that's used to protect your creative content. Once you create a dance routine and you fix it on, you record it with your phone or record it with a video camera, it's automatically protected. There are other steps you can take to further protect your creative works, such as registering it with the Copyright Office. If you're going to have other people perform this dance, you may want to have a contract giving them, again, a license to use your content, because in essence, both your brand and your content, both your trademarks and your copyrightable material, they're intellectual property being the word that you have to look at. And so you want to take steps to just protect that property. And that is it. I know it's brief because I can talk on and on for hours about this, but I implore you to go to my website, because I actually have written lots of articles, have given interviews about these particular topics, entities, contracts, copyright, and trademark. I give a lot of information on my website, on my blog, if you can check that out. I also provide a free business checklist that could be very helpful to you. I'm going to bring it back to Alejandra.
All right. So now we have some time set aside for answering questions that all of you may have. I already have some questions that I'm going to pose to the different panelists, but now's a good time for you to write your questions on our Facebook Live, or send your questions via Twitter for anything that you are interested in asking any of our specialists. So folks, if you can all go ahead and unmute yourselves and make your cameras live. We are going to start with a little bit of Q&A. So the first person I actually want to start with is Courtney. So Courtney, you know, I'm gonna shout you out / reveal some of our private combos. But Courtney is a long-term friend, and one of the things that when Dance NYC was going remotely, one of the things that you and I were talking about were some good practices around working remotely from the worker standpoint. You shared some really helpful tools on how to do it from the organizational standpoint, but if maybe I'm a worker and I'm not used to working from home, or that feels unusual for me, what are maybe 1 or 2 tips that you can share with folks for how they can care for themselves as they are working, and some things that they can do?
Give yourself a break is probably the best thing, like both a literal break in like time, but also a break like mentally and emotionally. The instinct is that people think because I'm at home, I'm doing less work, but the data actually shows that people who work from home tend to work longer because they're trying to compensate for being at home. So, you know, where if you were in an office, you know, you waste time, you take a walk, you go talk to people, you spend a little time, you may browse on Facebook a little bit, you may like give yourself some breaks in your 8-hour day, but people work from home and all of a sudden, because they have creature comforts, they stop doing some of those things. They don't have as many distractions in that same way. And so people are in fact working for longer. I don't necessarily want to say hyper productive because it's a different level of productivity. So build those breaks and ideas into your time. Take care of yourself. You're still going to do your job. You're still going to get the things done. The culture that says that because you're at home or relaxed that you aren't working is, again, connected to the negative things I was talking about earlier. So, you know, take a second to, you know, do your laundry if that's what you need to do, or like fix yourself a snack, or just walk and shake off like if there is a difficult moment. That's helpful. The other thing is you have to be kind of explicit about what behaviors you're presenting, particularly if you're managing people or if you are being managed. Like, if you have like schedule some regular meetings, like shorter meetings where you check in are better than trying to download everything in a long session. So more regular, shorter meetings are great. Using those check-ins to actually share information and things you've been thinking of. Like, it's easy to just be like in your head and not bring it to the group. In essence, like, your work life is now confined to a little bit of a box. So be really transparent and intentional about what you're bringing into that box, what you're bringing to communicate. Make sure, again, there are things that people could maybe pick up on if you were in shared space that don't translate digitally. So you have to be explicit about saying, this is where I need help, or this is where I'm struggling, or this is where I feel like this is going really well, or this is what I would like to talk to you about. You'd have to be proactive about your communication in that way.
Thanks a lot, Courtney. We work with a really amazing grant writer. Her name is Rosemary Reyes, and she has been working remotely from home for a long time. And she shared with us on the staff at Dance NYC a practice that she has, which is that because she doesn't spend the time that she used to spend before commuting, that time did not convert for her into more work time, but rather into time for her to intentionally schedule things to do that bring joy in her life. So maybe it's cooking a meal that feels, kind of like hearty, or maybe reading a book, or, still using that commuting time in a way that nurtures instead of seeing it as an opportunity to work longer. And that was something that stayed with me that I thought was very meaningful. So thank you so much, Courtney. Clarissa, one of the questions that has come up, and maybe you and Julian can tag team this in talking about budgeting, is I think that the assumption often is that budgeting is only for when you might have a lot of money, or that you have to have a lot of money in order to get purpose to your money. And then also that when you have limited funds, how do you prioritize what are the things that matter? One of the things, and I want, if you can both answer those questions, both from an organizational standpoint and thinking about particularly smaller organizations that right now are being the most impacted, and also from individual artists. We know that some of our freelance artists, for example, Julian, do not have access to pension funds and to 401ks. And so there might be other methods of folks preparing in advance or for the future, recognizing that maybe in this moment that might not be possible for them. But as they think about the future, I keep going back to what TL said about that we can't just go back to whatever normal was or whatever where we were at before, but that it needs to be radically different. So really with that lens, how can first some tips on budgeting, and what does budgeting actually mean, and what are some simple things that folks can do already to give purpose to their money, both the small and the individual folks, and then also how to prepare for the future for moments like this if they don't have the possibility of having a 401k or a pension, and what are some ways that you have been able to support artists in doing that?
Sure, great questions. And I think, Clarissa, maybe I can tackle the individual, and maybe you want to talk about the organizational, since
Sure.
I think that's kind of our best routes. So from the individual perspective, something that we always talk to clients about is building an emergency fund. And it's different for everybody what an emergency fund is. Obviously, you'd like to be able to put away as much money as you can for the event that something like this happens, where there's a work interruption, or you're in between grants. And there's different ways that you can do that. It's, as money's coming in, allocate a little bit out of all that money that you're able to put to the side that you're not going to touch. And again, it looks different for everybody how a budget works. Everybody has different things that they need to spend money on. They have different allocations for their projects and for touring. So it is really hyper specific to an individual artist how they budget. Individuals who don't have access to things like 401ks or 403bs, there is still the opportunity for them to start things like a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA. And those can be opened really at your bank or with an online broker or a website like Betterment. And it's so simple that every time you get paid, just take a little bit of money off the table. And when you put that into one of your retirement accounts, if it's a traditional IRA, that's money that not only are you saving for yourself, but that's money that you're able to also reduce from your tax return. So if you make a certain amount of money, it doesn't really matter what it is. If you put away $100, $200, $300 a year into your retirement IRA that you can open as an individual, that's money you're saving for down the road, and you're reducing your taxable burden each year. So that's one thing, even if you don't have an organization that you're associated with, that you can start saving for, quote unquote, retirement. And then for budgeting, there are good tools. So I did mention mint.com. Mint will help you figure out how to budget. If you work with an advisor can sit down with you and really take you step by step. And don't think of, advisors as only for people with, significant wealth. It's not the case. Myself and a lot of other advisors work with emerging artists who are really looking to get their financial planning in order. And again, it's very specific for each person how to budget. But a good way to start is really go back through a prior month or two, figure out where you've spent money. And there's going to be some surprising things like how much you spent on takeout and for food and for Ubers and things like that, and try to figure out ways that you can cut and you can reduce your discretionary spend where you might not need to, and take some of that money off the table and put it into that emergency fund for yourself, whether it's just in your savings account at your credit union or into something like a retirement account, which you can open up for yourself. Clarissa, did you want to tackle a little bit on the organizational front?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Julian.
Yep.
So I'm going to speak to, I think some of these things can definitely apply to even individual artists, even though if you're technically not incorporated, some of these things still apply to you because you may see your artistic entity as separate from perhaps your personal bills and whatnot, even if, on a formal level, you are still putting it all in the same tax return. So I do want to say, I think when it comes to budgeting, I was an artist myself, so I get it that there's, and I work with artists every single day who the last thing they want to do is work on their budget and deal with numbers. So I have that not unfortunate job. I think it's a fortunate job, but I always have that challenge that I work with artists and I have to convince them to be excited to do these budgets and cash flows and whatnot. So the first thing I always say is it's not this big, scary thing. At the end of the day, a budget could literally be written on a piece of paper at its minimum. It could be on an Excel sheet, or those that are a little bit more established might have a QuickBooks accounting software or something like that. But what I want to say about it is that budgeting is definitely not just if you have money. So I am a numbers person. And so there's been many times in my life that I did not have money. And then there's times that I've had more money. And every single aspect of my life, I'm always doing a budget, whether it's that I'm making a career choice and I'm working on a side project, I'm doing budgets all the time. Or even if I can get invited to a wedding, I'm doing a budget to see if I'm attending that wedding. And that's just sort of my brain. I've always been prepare for the worst, hope for the best mentality. And so for me, I think what's most effective about actually writing these numbers down, because I think a lot of you are like, well, it's easy. I know how much money I have in my head. It's like barely anything. It's only enough to cover the necessities. But sometimes when you really break it down and you can visually see it, I know a lot of us as artists, we are visual learners. And so when you can really see it on a piece of paper, on an Excel sheet, that's when you can see things that perhaps you didn't see before, and it can help you make strategic decisions. And so one thing I always encourage people when they're first starting out is to do different types of budgets. Different scenarios, a conservative, one that's a little bit more dreamy, and a sort of realistic. Same thing when it comes to cash flow. So that's a little bit about just conceptually how I feel about budgeting. For me, it's helped me make decisions that sometimes are a little difficult to see otherwise. I do also want to say that in terms of moving forward, I agree with Alejandra that it's not about going back to normal, because obviously in the arts world, even a month ago when we weren't really talking about the coronavirus, I was still meeting with artists, and they were tell me about their challenges financially and how the cash flow is just not there, the funding is not there. And so maybe this is an opportunity to kind of reset, and how can we move forward to a better normal than ever before. So I'm just the way I am. I always come from an infrastructure place. So that's why I keep saying, like, let's go back to the basics. What are your income? What are your expenses? Seeing it will help you prioritize. It'll help you strategize. And then what is it that you want to see down the line, right? So even just look at this year. There's probably been some cancellations. What are your different cash flow scenarios? If you are committed to rescheduling an engagement, what does that look like for you financially? Can it happen? Or what if you decide not to do it because you want to invest in your infrastructure this year and do like some things, maybe some engagements or more low-key events, and then go out with a bang in 2021? You know, everybody's situation is different. There are a lot of opportunities, and so I'm not going to spend the time now to list all the different funding opportunities, but take a look. There's a lot of great stuff. I know Dance NYC is posting stuff. Pentacle is also keeping track of all these resources, all these different ways, like making sure you're up to date that your New York State Insurance Fund workers' comp plans. Do you know that you can actually reach out to them and they will readjust your premiums for you? Or these taxes that they're actually, the deadlines are getting extended. How can you like extend some of those expenses down the line, and also just in terms of cash flow reasons? So just keep posted on that sort of stuff. We'll be featuring some of it on our social media as well, just to keep everybody in the loop. And also, I know Julian mentioned working with an advisor. So Pentacle is a nonprofit, and so we do that. We have a service called Financial Urgent Care. And what we do is we help artists that they're in this urgent crisis situation. They don't know what to do, so they come to us and we go through everything. We assess and we say, okay, here are some options. Here's a plan for you to feel financially sustainable moving forward. So there are a lot of resources, obviously, aside from Pentacle, that aren't necessarily tied to high fees and whatnot, especially during this time.
TL, I want to bring you into this conversation as we're talking about money and its intersection and justice, and also the ways in which communities have different communities have different relationships to money, and also different awarenesses of their rights and the resources that are available to them. And I keep thinking a lot also about how for some folks it might not be safe to put their money in the bank, and so there are other ways in which saving can occur, and how do we have a relationship with money that allows folks to care for their well-being and the well-being of their communities. One of the things that I want to name before passing it over to you briefly is for artists and organizations in this moment. One of the things that we're really advising folks is for you to have a good you take good notes of what are your increased expenses or losses as a result of this moment. So what gigs have you lost? How much were those gigs supposed to provide you financially? The same way that employers are required to provide you written notification if they're laying you off or something like that, that the gig workers are also asking for that kind of notification, so that you have this information on hand as we continue to see what changes are coming, and for organizations as well. For some people, this moment has meant a combination of increased expenses and lost income. And so having a sense of what that is will be important as different organizations and members of Congress respond to this moment and create potential policies that can benefit you. But now I want to turn it to TL briefly, and then I want to share where I'm going next. Then I'm going to open it up to Elizabeth and to Merlin to share with us a little bit about individual employees and how they might get some additional unemployment support. I know some folks don't even know maybe how to apply to unemployment or if they qualify. And then Jaime, I want you to close us off with messaging, with sharing a little bit of, while we are reimagining how we share our work or how we talk about our work, how do we also instill hope in this moment? So TL, Elizabeth, and Merlin, and then we'll close it off with Jaime.
Thanks. This is TL. I appreciate that invitation. And I think I mentioned at the outset that a lot of the so-called responses to the current more visible crises of healthcare and just health injustice generally, and just general inequities within our society are being painted as issues that need to be independently or individually addressed, as opposed to something that requires a collective addressing of kind of underlying crises that now has just erupted, kind of like the powder keg that our ancestors talked about before the 1960s, where perpetual inequities and injustice lead us to a place of resistance that is a bit more visible, or lead us to a place of crises that is a bit more visible, whereas that crises or the injustice has always been there. So what we need is a radical redistribution of resources. There are entities, including our government, including corporations, philanthropic organizations, that right now have more than sufficient means to support and protect the most vulnerable of us who exist. And right now, the means testing, ideas around unemployment benefits that are dependent upon citizenship status, that are dependent upon having had access to work before, that are dependent upon not having been a disabled person, with a $2,000 asset cap for your SSI, SSDI. All of these things are not being considered. And so means testing around who's going to get money. So there's like artists and activist funds that have been set up by various philanthropic organizations. I don't want to name any right now, but please go and search the mutual aid and support documents and search for that language, artist and activist relief funds. A lot of those funds are not about means testing. They're not about who worked before, how much work are you doing now. It's simply providing the funds to people because we can presume that folks are going to be in desperate need now, much more so than ever. And so I think that's important. Taking care of each other is critically important, especially those who are amongst the most privileged, people who are generationally wealthy right now, who have the benefit of discussing things that folks who are not generationally wealthy, or who are not citizens, people who are disabled, who are multiply marginalized, should be at the forefront of making sure that folks are being taken care of. Folks with freedom privilege, people who are free, should be fighting to get folks who are incarcerated and institutionalized out of those situations immediately, and not wait until mass genocide of folks who are incarcerated in these different ways. And the last thing is, at baseline for me, once this thing is over, if whoever is left surviving, standing, wheeling around this nation, at baseline, all of the things that we now see set up that disabled people have been begging for years and not gotten it, interpreter and captioning access, access to paid leave, like all of these things that now all of a sudden money has magically materialized for. Those things at minimum should remain even post-pandemic apocalypse, if that's what folks want to call it. But I want folks to recognize that many folks have been living in a pandemic apocalypse long before people noticed that the coronavirus was proliferating the globe. So those are my few thoughts on that. I think just being empathetic and realizing that what now for many people is new isolation, all these different things, for various reasons. A lot of our communities have been perpetually isolated, food apartheid, incarceration, institutionalization. Those things have always existed. And I want to know what folks are going to do to continue to fight against that long after this pandemic has passed.
I was muted. Thank you. Elizabeth and Merlin, do you want to share a little bit from the individual artist perspective, Elizabeth, specifically on how artists or individual workers might be able to access unemployment right now? And Merlin, one of the things that keeps coming up is like intellectual property and how folks can be guarding their work in this moment where they're like making it digitally, and what does that mean? So, and I know that those are those two questions alone are day-long workshops. So, you know, top things that come to mind for you that you can share with folks.
Sure, I'm happy to speak about unemployment and steps workers can take to apply for and receive unemployment benefits. So unemployment is issued on a state-by-state basis. So if you are located in New York State, you can go to the New York State Department of Labor website. I just looked it up so I can give it to everyone. It's www.labor.newyork.gov. Now, when you're applying for unemployment benefits, it matters if you are a W-2 employee or whether you are a 1099 independent contractor. As many of you know, when you are a W-2 employee, the government takes certain taxes and things out of your paycheck. One of those things goes towards unemployment. So if you are a W-2 employee, you'll qualify for unemployment. If you are a 1099 worker, you may not be eligible. You should still go to the website and enter in all of your previous places of employment to see if you do qualify for any benefits. In addition, traditionally, there was a 7-day waiting period to receive unemployment benefits in New York State. Governor Cuomo has waived that so that you are now able to get money faster through the government. Also, I want you to be mindful that the federal government is also working to help get money to workers. So I mentioned earlier, we are going to see legislation being pushed through in the next few weeks that will help workers who are out of work so they can get through this very difficult time.
And I will speak about protecting your intellectual property. There are 3 major types of intellectual property. There are patents, there are trademarks, and copyright. So I think for dancers, the most applicable one is copyright. And so what exactly is copyright? Because I think sometimes people confuse trademarks and copyright. Copyright, it protects creative works. So movies, songs, lyrics to songs, the actual beats to the songs as well. Anything that's creative is protected by copyright law. Before 1978, you were able, in order to get copyright protection, you had to follow this formal process that was long and expensive. But after 1978, which we are in the time right now, it's 2020, as soon as you create something that is one, original, a work of authorship, which choreographic works as of 1978, they are considered to be a work of authorship, and it's fixed in something tangible, your phone, a video camera, you gain copyright protection automatically. And so what I think people mean when they want to protect their IP is how they protect how do they prevent other people from using it? Because your IP, once you get the copyright protection, you have the exclusive right to reproduce the work, to perform the work, to do whatever you want with it. It's your exclusive right. If anyone wants to do that, they have to get your permission. And so the best thing for you to do is, once you make the work public, is to register it with the copyright office. You can go to the copyright office. It's not that hard to register a work. So each dance creation you create, you just want to do that because you don't know how valuable your dance is going to be. I've been seeing in the news media recently some dances that have been appropriated by other people and are making them money, but not the creators themselves. It just shows you that you don't know the value of something until it happens. So you just want to be safe and just take those steps preemptively to protect your work.
To follow up, somebody asked, what about like content or workshops or things that are now being developed through Zoom? And it's recording that counts, falls within that same umbrella. Mm-hmm. And then additionally, for Elizabeth, folks are wondering about, how, if you have any sense of how the federal protections might support these 1099 and freelance artists that right now are not necessarily covered under under unemployment. So those are the 2 follow-ups that we've gotten since you both were answering questions.
To answer the first question, yes, your Zoom conference that contains content is copyrightable because it's original. It's a work of authorship, it's writing, it's something that's written down, and it's fixed in something tangible. Whether your computer be tangible, it definitely is. So it's something that could also be protected by copyright law.
Oh, hi, I'm unmuted. So something that's in the works to help every every American right now is the federal government is trying to put forward legislation that would give cash to individuals, because there are a lot of people who do not fall into different categories for leave and benefits. So the legislation that the federal government is currently working on is literally getting cash to every American who's suffering during this very difficult time, and really putting no standards of who gets it, and households with children will get more, things like that, to help every American get through this difficult time.
The other thing I want to say, referencing what TL shared earlier, on our website, a Dance NYC website, we also have in the coronavirus resources page a list of all of the different philanthropic opportunities that are available right now, and funds that have been made, as well as community and organizer-led funds that they function differently, and each of, some of them are very demography specific or art specific or group specific, but we've included all of the ones that we found across the country and in New York City in there. So folks do reach out and check that out so that you can see what opportunities are available to you. Many of these funds are, of course, noting what a lot of folks on the comments have been noting, which is that freelance artists right now don't have quick access to that support that others might. And so some of these funds are filling that gap. The other thing I want to say is that on our website, you will also find a lot of resources on mental health. There are several mental health professionals that are providing pro bono services and support right now to the arts community for those that do not, cannot afford or do not have access to mental health providers. Also want to name the Actors Fund that has a variety of emergency funds and resources. I know that it's a little confusing sometimes. The name the Actors Fund makes it think that it's not for dancers, but it is for dancers. It's for performing artists, and they have an entire section of the Actors Fund that serves artists specifically. But again, all of the resources that all of us are naming, including any flyers or PDFs or items that the presenters here have shared today, we will be including them in the Symposium website in terms of this session specifically, but more broadly in our coronavirus resource page, where all of these links are organized by topic so that it's easy for you to search through and get the information that you need, excuse me. With that, I'm gonna pass it over to Jaime, who is gonna close us out and share some final notes on how we are telling our stories in this moment, how are we communicating, and how can we remain connected, even as for the health of our community, we should remain home.
Okay, hi everyone. What a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much for including me in it. I think ultimately it's rare that so many of us can have a clear common denominator together in a world with millions of highly niche-based media platforms and channels. We have a shared experience currently with this pandemic. I think it's time to disarm and diffuse tension. And I think we do that messaging wise with being really humble, with being really vulnerable, and being as generous as possible. So I would say share your experience, and we can inherently relate to each other better than before. I'm always dragging this soapbox out. Though it's exploited now, the internet was ultimately designed as a community building tool and a place to share knowledge. So I say if we are returning to basics in terms of infrastructure, in terms of how we communicate, that's one way to do it. I would continue to acknowledge the truth of our shared experience. You can even do this on something like an Instagram bio. Like if it's about community building right now, you can put a special message in that Instagram bio, do some targeted following, which just means you go to people that you deeply relate to that you don't currently follow. You follow them, and then when they visit your profile, because they'll get an alert and click through, you have a message of support and love for them. You will actually see benefits from being vulnerable. Again, things that seem counterproductive with promotion actually often are quite productive. You might get a really big boost in your following that way. I mean, I do this with my clients all the time. Another interesting tip, actionable tip, social messenger services are often even more effective than email for getting responses and reaching out. You could use something like an Instagram message thread with a group of co-conspirators that you've enlisted, and we can all yell together about the change we want to see in these chaotic times. I mean, I think a lot of people are always asking me, like, how do you be human in a digital space? And I think you continue to be human. So we're all part of a shared community, everyone listening right now. And what good is community if we're not supporting each other? So that's my soapbox for today. And you can reach out with me if you have any other queries about how to do this.
All right, all. Well, thank you so very much for joining us for all of your offerings today. I want to say that, you know, a lot of the things that we've learned and a lot of the things that are coming ahead, we hope to remain responsive to questions that might surface, to anything that folks might be needing in this time. And Dance NYC will continue to share resources as we hear about them throughout the community. Don't be afraid to reach out, send us an email. If you call our offices, we're at home, so it might be easier to leave a voicemail for us to be able to get back to you, because you might not get a response right away. But know that we are here to serve you, to be a resource for you. Don't forget to, as different arts organizations right now are working together to advocate for the needs of artists, for freelance artists, for organizations of every size, for the work that we do collectively, we will share opportunities and sample language for how you can reach your members of government if that is something that is safe for you to do. Whether it's your representatives or senators, on how to advocate on behalf of this industry and this community to ensure that our rights are represented as they continue to draft policy that will impact us for the future and for this moment. So please do also, you will also find information on how you can do that in that resource page as well. And we're happy to help you through that if you have any questions. As we continue through our symposium today, we are now closing out this session. I want to just thank every single one of our panelists. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for the lineages of learning that you've brought, for the people that you've brought into the room with your presence here today, recognizing that the learning that Dance NYC has done as an organization didn't originate from us either, and that we're able to share in these resources from a community effort and from many, many, many folks that are putting into this pot, I would say. Keep the conversations going. Continue to tag us on Twitter at Dance NYC, on Instagram at dance.nyc, and on Facebook, dance/NYC, and use the hashtags DanceSimp, Simp 2020, and DGSimp. All of today's content will be available digitally online after as well. And of course, continue to share your feedback with us about this session and any of the sessions today by filling out our survey. We really appreciate you all, and we will see you at our next and final session of the day at 5 o'clock. And one more time, thank you to our speakers. Thank you all.